Technological Directorate told local media the formation was an example of lens clouds, which generally form as a result of strong wind fluctuations.
It caps a terrible year for home resales, which fell nearly 18% in 2022 to the lowest level since 2014. The Federal Reserve's interest rate hiking cycle, the fastest since the 1980s, has plunged housing into a recession. And meanwhile, Google is laying off 12,000 workers, or about 6% of its workforce, becoming the latest tech company to trim staff. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
Google has had to alert its employees that they'll have to lay off up to 12,000 people. This joins the latest trend in the tech industry of massive layoffs. This recent addition of layoffs adds to Microsoft's 10,000, Meta's 11,000, Cisco's 4,100, and Twitter's 3,700. In just the past month, there have been nearly 50,000 job cuts across the technology sector.
As they said in their blog post, they overhired during the pandemic, and that's the same reason many other tech companies have given for layoffs.
Google parent company Alphabet stock jumped in the market. This often happens when investors are hoping that job cuts will reduce company expenses and add to net profits.
They're taking that action to adjust their costs to what is expected to be a rocky period in the next few quarters.
The Silicon Valley giant CEO Sundar Pichai shared the news Friday in an email to staff, which was also posted on the company's news blog. Those job cuts are hitting smaller players as well. UK-based cybersecurity firm Sophos laid off 450 employees, or 10% of its global workforce. And cryptocurrency trading platform Coinbase cut 20% of its workforce, about 950 jobs, in its second round of layoffs in less than a year. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
In the tech world, more layoffs continue, with Google announcing this morning new plans to cut 12,000 employees. It's one of their biggest rounds of layoffs ever and makes Google the latest company to announce major layoffs in the new year. More tech giants announcing tens of thousands of job cuts include Microsoft, Amazon, and Facebook parent Meta. And just this month alone, there have been at least 48,000 job cuts announced by major companies in the tech sector. A number of CEOs have taken the blame for growing too fast and claim these cuts are necessary to cut costs and preserve margins. The search is still on to find a missing Oscar-nominated actor. The San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department said crews are using helicopters and drones to search for actor Julian Sands. Sands, 65, was reported missing Friday after going hiking on a trail on Mount Baldy in Southern California. The ground search has been suspended since Saturday because of dangerous conditions. A fire burning for over 50 days has prompted the Environmental Protection Agency to help extinguish the underground landfill fire burning between Trussville and Moody in Alabama. The EPA said it deployed officials Thursday to provide air monitoring support and to implement fire mitigation operations. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey declared a state of emergency for St. Clair County on Wednesday, warning that the smoke from the fire had the potential to impact residents' health. Local residents have been reporting headaches, coughing, red eyes, and breathing problems.
Gannett and others have cut their staffs. The Washington Post is also expected to announce layoffs soon. Companies that haven't laid off employees are taking big steps to cut costs. And on Wall Street, stocks rallied today, closing higher. The Dow added 331 points, or 1%. S&P rose 74 points, or 1.9%. And the Nasdaq gained 228 points, or 2.7%. T-Mobile yesterday said it's investigating a data breach involving 37 million postpaid and prepaid accounts. The mobile carrier said it identified malicious activity on January 5th. Though it said no sensitive data, like financial information, was compromised, but basic customer data was obtained. That's including names, business addresses, emails, and phone numbers. The Wall Street Journal reported Thursday that the FCC has opened an investigation into the data breach. Last year, T-Mobile agreed to pay $350 million and spend an additional $150 million to upgrade data security. Those payments were made to settle litigation over a cyber attack in 2021. T-Mobile has more than 110 million subscribers.
An often overlooked factor of inflation is the rising cost of diesel fuel. We'll dive into what policies are driving this and take a closer look at America's ongoing transition to renewable energy. Today was the 50th anniversary of the March for Life. It was also their first march since the overturning of Roe versus Wade. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
Welcome to the 50th March for Life. Thank you for coming.
Jeannie Mancini, the president of March for Life, got the crowd excited.
I want to welcome you to the world's largest, longest running annual human rights demonstration, the March for Life.
This is the organization's first march since Roe versus Wade was overturned. She said there will still be about 700,000 abortions in America this year. Mancini said this year's March for Life theme will be focused on the next steps, one of which is to get more pro-life laws passed at the state level. Then she introduced several guests to speak in front of the crowd, including House Majority Leader Steve Scalise.
Only think about this. A bill that says if a baby's born alive outside the womb, you can't kill the baby and call it abortion. 1 out of 212 Democrats supported that bill. Now, that's not America. 70% of Democrats in America think it's wrong to allow that baby to die. Yet up here in Washington, that's how extreme they have gotten.
And former professional football coach Tony Dungy spoke about the Buffalo Bills player who recently survived a cardiac arrest on the field.
We need to pray with the same fervor that we prayed with during that week, because God answers prayer, and he will answer these prayers to save these precious unborn lives as we go forward.
NTD heard from a former Planned Parenthood director, Abby Johnson, who spoke about abortions by pill.
We don't even know what the psychological impact is going to be for these women who take these drugs and see their fully formed babies, floating in a toilet. And they're not going to be ready for that. They're not going to be prepared for that, because everything on the internet tells these women it's just like taking a Tylenol. And they're being lied to. They have no idea what to expect. And then what do? Do they flush their baby down the toilet? Do they pick it up? Do they take it somewhere to bury it? They don't know. They're not going to know.
Since this was the first March for Life since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, some said the atmosphere was more joyful than the previous marches. And their first march was in 1974, 1 year after abortions became legal in the United States. Those who are pro-abortion say women should have the right to make decisions about their own bodies. Jason Perry, NTD News.
For these women who take these drugs and see their fully formed babies, floating in a toilet, and they're not going to be ready for that. They're not going to be prepared for that, because everything on the internet tells these women it's just like taking a Tylenol. And they're being lied to. They have no idea what to expect. And then what do? Do they flush their baby down the toilet? Do they pick it up? Do they take it somewhere to bury it? They don't know. They're not going to know.
Since this was the first March for Life since the overturning of Roe versus Wade, some said the atmosphere was more joyful than the previous marches. And their first march was in 1974, 1 year after abortions became legal in the United States. Those who are pro-abortion say women should have the right to make decisions about their own bodies. Jason Perry, NTD News.
The Federal Aviation Administration has revealed what happened on January 11th when a systems outage grounded thousands of flights and disrupted air travel across the U.S. Over 11,000 flights were disrupted when a key pilot notification system went down, stranding some planes on the ground for hours. The FAA has been probing the reasons behind the failure. The agency's preliminary review says contract staff unintentionally deleted files when transferring data between databases. It added that it has so far found no evidence of a cyber attack or malicious intent. Aviation insiders said they couldn't recall a system-wide outage of such magnitude that was caused by a technological snag.
The incredible story of their daughter's birth. A typical busy busy Tuesday on I-75 in late November led to a not-so-typical birth story for Atlanta couple Loston and Deshae Fudd.
Literally, my water broke, and a second later, she was in my pants.
It all started when Deshae started noticing signs of labor.
My husband had got off work early because he knew I was having contractions. So as soon as he got off work, I was like, pack the car, let's go to the hospital.
Soon after getting on I-75 North, things started progressing fast.
We were there for about 10 minutes, and my water broke. And I was like, oh my gosh, my water just broke. And then something like exploded in my pants. And I was like, something is in my pants. Like, can you check and see what's in my pants? And he had to, like, he was like panicking, trying to drive and look. And he was like, is that the baby?
Not knowing what else to do, Loston kept driving.
Stretched out, I'm like, okay, yeah, the baby is the baby. Okay, we good, but it's in your pants. We not good. It's 15 minutes on the GPS. This is bad. Like, put her back in you. Put her back inside of you. Down. What are you doing? Like, oh my God. All in my passenger seat. Oh my God.
Thankfully, a Georgia State Patrol trooper was passing by, and Loston managed to flag him down.
I rolled down the window. I'm like, yo. He was acting all crazy. Didn't even understand what I was saying. I was just like, all right, man, okay, I just need you to get me to the hospital. Got a baby in the passenger seat.
The trooper escorted the couple through traffic, helping them reach the hospital safely with their newborn baby girl.
He just ran into the hospital, and a couple minutes later, it was like 15 labor and delivery nurses running to the car, and they cut the umbilical cord right there in the car, wrapped the baby up, got me in a wheelchair, and handed me the baby and took us up. I didn't even have enough time to have an emotion. It was just total shock. Like, it was straight from shock to, is she okay, to let's just get there.
Little Dariah Denise was given the all clear, weighing 5 pounds, 7 ounces, and born in Atlanta traffic.
I definitely agree with the Atlanta is packed comments now.
I always knew it was bad. Like, it just was a bad time for it to be bad.
Yeah. Gas stoves over alleged health concerns. And many Democrats, of course, jumped on board. The one-party media says Republicans are just trying to create a new culture war. I'm David Fiorazzo, and this is Christ and Culture. So, the theory. The left is being outrageous on purpose so that the next radical idea they try to push receives a little less resistance because it's not quite as ridiculous. What do you think? This is a tactic they've used again and again to gain ground. I'm calling this the gaslight or the gas stove strategy. But is it a non-story, as they suggest? You tell me. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission had discussed stopping production of new gas appliances and encouraging people to discontinue using them. And naturally, it's all under the guise of saving the environment. That's right. Now, over 40% of homes have gas stoves, so this could be a problem. But the commission could set standards on emissions from gas stoves or even look to ban gas stove imports or manufacturing. They're trying to make this about climate and health. Here's what AOC tweeted. Did you know that ongoing exposure to NO2 from gas stoves is linked to reduced cognitive performance? Well, there's the expert. She should know. She's likely used a gas stove all her life. Now, Ocasio-Cortez immediately endorsed the wild idea of doing away with gas stoves after a Bloomberg News report that a ban was on the table. Then, as the left often does, the Safety Commission quickly backtracked after the report came out, assuring Americans that if we like our gas stoves, we could keep our gas stoves. Seriously, they sheepishly suggested a gas stove ban was not really being considered, though the commission still plans to hold a public comment period on the alleged dangers. Senator Cory Booker, for example, wrote a letter to the agency last month calling the harmful emissions a cumulative burden on minorities. You heard that right. Gas stoves. New York's Democrat Governor, Kathy Hochul, gave an address Tuesday and announced a plan to eliminate gas heating and appliances from all construction projects by the year 2030. Another radical, Richard Trumka Jr., said gas stoves were creating a hidden hazard. So AOC told New Yorkers to watch for future tax credits or rebates for gas-free appliances. She said last year's so-called Inflation Reduction Act contains funding for a lot of different climate-related rebates for people, end quote. Now, these people apparently have thought this through, but why haven't we heard much about the importance of, for example, better ventilation to improve any potential negative health effects of kitchens and indoor stoves? Now, that would be common sense, right? Karen Harbert, president of American Gas Association, argued against a ban, saying this: the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission and EPA do not present gas ranges as a significant contributor to adverse air quality or health hazard in their technical or public information literature, guidance, or requirements, end quote. To the power-grabbing, money-grubbing progressives crying, environmental disaster. If it's not cows or coal or cars, now it's gas stoves or something else we use in everyday life, right? Fearmonger, legislate, regulate, control. The strategy of the left is to start with something absolutely outrageous, even demanding the impossible. Then, down the road, they suggest something just a little less ridiculous, and since it doesn't seem as outlandish, there's a bit more openness to hear them out. Now, you may have seen the photos online of AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Dr. Jill Biden, and Kamala Harris in their kitchens, all of them using gas stoves. Nothing to see here. Move along. It's just media gas lighting at this point. But
out of work 2 years ago this week. Now the net number is under 1.6 million. We're also making the biggest investment ever in climate.
And thus, as the White House on Friday sent out a cheat sheet about job growth and cooling inflation, highlighting what it calls the overwhelming popularity of the president's economic agenda. But the Republican National Committee gives a less rosy assessment of Biden's 2 years. Writing on Friday, American workers are seeing their paychecks shrink, and families are paying more for gas and groceries. All this as scrutiny continues to grow over Biden's handling of classified documents. After dodging reporters' questions for a week, Biden on Thursday broke silence on the discovery of the files, but only to say he does not regret not telling the public earlier.
We immediately turned them over to the archives and the Justice Department. We're fully cooperating, looking forward to getting this resolved quickly. I think you're going to find there's nothing there. I have no regrets. I'm following what the lawyers have told me they want me to do. It's exactly what we're doing. There's no there. Thank you.
And the increased flow in Chinese money. So, what has the net effect been? Well, one, if you look at the Biden Penn Center, they talk about the study of global statesmanship. So there's a nice picture of then Vice President Joe Biden with President Xi of China. That's kind of the picture that they disclose. Then further down on the website, they disclose what are the chief threats that the United States is facing. No mention of China. The only three mentioned are climate change, Russia, and global terrorism. You certainly could say Russia and global terrorism represent a threat. I mean, if you want to, you could say climate change if you believe in that. But the notion that China does not represent a threat to the United States is absurd, because remember, the Obama-Biden administration actually did a pivot. We actually redeployed military forces from Europe to Asia precisely because it was recognized that China was a threat. But the Biden Center says nothing about that. So that's another example of how the debate and the conversation on college campuses are being skewed, I would argue, because of the flow of Chinese money, in the case of Joe Biden, to his family, but also to the Biden Penn Center.
And so, circling back to our initial point, Joe Biden, After leaving the vice presidency and establishing this mostly ceremonial office within the University of Pennsylvania, where the only discernible benefit to the school was an influx of Chinese cash, well, somehow it appears that a trove of classified documents followed him along. But that's not the only interesting aspect, because there's also the question of timing. The discovery of these documents was made on November the 2nd. November 2nd, which was 6 full days before the midterm elections. The U.S. government, including both the National Archives as well as the FBI and, of course, the DOJ, were made well aware of these documents almost a week prior to Election Day. And yet somehow it took them 2 full months to inform the rest of the public, which, according to a former lawyer with the House Oversight Committee that we here at the Epoch Times had a chance to speak with, well, this was directly a form of election interference. Here's what he told us. Quote, "The documents were allegedly discovered on November 2nd. The midterms are on November 8th. To me, this is election interference by omission. Why was this information not made public prior to the election? It likely would have had substantial electoral salience. People need to be aware that our elections, when things like this happen, are not free and fair." Now, in terms of Joe Biden himself, when news of these initial documents being found at the Penn Biden Center began coming to light, he was down in Mexico at the North American Leaders Summit. And when a reporter asked him about these documents, well, here was his response.
When my lawyers were clearing out my office at the University of Pennsylvania, they set up an office for me, secure office in the Capitol. The 4 years after being vice president, I was a professor at Penn. They found some documents in a box, locked cabinet, or at least a closet. And as soon as they did, they realized there were several classified documents in that box. And they did what they should have done. They immediately called the archives, turned them over to the archives, and I was briefed about this discovery and surprised to learn that there were any government records that were taken there to that office. But I don't know what's in the documents. My lawyers have not suggested I ask what documents they were. I've turned over the boxes. They've turned over the boxes to the archives, and we're cooperating fully with the review, and which I hope will be finished soon, and there'll be more detail at that time.
Okay, so that's all well and good, except for the fact that right after that initial batch, more classified documents were again discovered, this time in Joe Biden's private home. Specifically, what allegedly happened was that after finding the initial batch of documents at the Penn Biden Center, Joe Biden's lawyers conducted a search of his personal residence over in Wilmington, Delaware. And after doing so, the lawyers claim to have discovered documents that contain classified markings in both a storage space in the garage as well as in a room that was adjacent to the garage. Here was a statement that was released by Joe Biden's team shortly after making the discovery. Quote, "Following the discovery of government documents at the Penn Biden Center in November of 2022, the president's lawyers have searched other locations where files from his vice presidential office might have been shipped in the course of the 2017 transition. During the review, the lawyers discovered among personal and political papers a small number of additional Obama-Biden administration records with classified markings." And again, the lawyers claimed that after finding those documents, they immediately informed the Department of Justice. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.
So he was basically employed by BHR partners during that timeline. Well, this is the timeline of the documents. The documents date back into the 2019 timeline, or, if you look at Joe Biden as vice president, 2008 to 2016, these documents have been at that residence at least from 2019, if the reports are correct. And that's at the same time that Hunter Biden was renting that residence, which is Joe Biden's home. He was paying Joe Biden $50,000 a month to stay at that house. So all of this ties him together there. Now, there's another concerning piece of information, and it has to do with Chinese businessman Patrick Ho, who also has ties to the Chinese military intelligence or the Chinese Communist Party. He was also associated with and very close to Hunter Biden during this period of time through the BHR lithium relationship. And then this can also tie in James Biden, President Biden's brother, James Biden, because in 2017, Patrick Ho was arrested in the United States, and the first person that he had called was James Biden to get him out of jail, according to Peter Schweitzer, the author of Red Handed. So all of this ties the Bidens closely to BHR, a Chinese lithium company.
Definitely quite concerning if those are to be true. And Rex, zooming in on the lobbying efforts, you and I have talked about TikTok before, right? And especially in terms of the National Defense Authorization Act, but it seems that TikTok lobbying efforts go beyond that. So tell us what you found.
Okay, real quickly, I want to bow tie the information with Hunter Biden because this all ties back to the Inflation Reduction Act and the Omnibus Bill. In the Inflation Reduction Act, there were $385 billion set aside, and the Omnibus Bill was $140 billion. So that's over $500 million set aside for green initiatives. Now, if you look at this, that's a lot of money. We can tie this back to Afghanistan and our withdrawal from Afghanistan because the Brookings Institute put together a report and they released it in August of 2022, stating that China's investment in lithium in Afghanistan was leading the world. And why is this important? Because we pulled out of Afghanistan and they have the world's largest lithium deposits. So we pulled out of Afghanistan at a time we're migrating to green energy, yet we left the world's largest lithium deposits open and then allowed the Taliban to take control of that, who they have close ties to China. Now China is coming into Afghanistan, and they're going to be the leaders at mining that lithium out of Afghanistan. That in and itself is another national security threat that we need to be aware of as well. So getting to ByteDance, again, this is tied to China's hybrid warfare against the West. ACG, American Continental Group, was hired by ByteDance, the developers of TikTok. ACG's, one of their founders is David Urban. He's a former presidential advisor to Trump and a former CNN host. Now, go figure, how does a CNN host, as liberal as they are, have ties to Donald Trump? So that's,
I think it's clear now that we now have in our elites a preponderance of people who want to get rid of the people's role in our government. And am I being too alarmist? Because I think we're teetering on the edge of the utter collapse of whatever we have left of our sovereignty as a people.
Well, when you look at some of the wars that we've gotten involved in, and I know it's kind of conspiracy theory territory, but in Iraq, Saddam Hussein was moving towards a gold standard. You saw in Libya, actually, Gaddafi was moving towards a more of a gold standard. And you're actually seeing right now in China, China is buying up tons of gold. Russia is buying up tons of gold. Why is it? Because you have these other nations who are actually being, we're looking at Russia as an enemy, and we're looking at certain places as an enemy, and China is, a friend and a frenemy. And there are other nations who have power and military who don't want to see America be the hegemony of the financial system. And so there is a war, and there's a tug of war happening. And the house of cards that was built in 1944, where you had all these guys get together and they created this, the dollar standard. The other nations don't have this. African nations can't just print a bunch of money. When you see that happening, like in Zimbabwe, the country went under socialist principles. And so you're going to see, you're not Chicken Little. This is for real, guys. We are going to see the collapse of this, because this printing of these dollars is a house of cards. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of
and
when.
They postponed it in 2008. And there are those of us on the outside, maybe I sound very Ron Paulish, we are just ready for the collapse. And it's going to be bad. It's not like I'm excited about it, but we will never be able to rebuild and wake people up until the house of cards collapses and you see that it was never there to begin with.
So I think that that's where so you're not being an alarmist, although throughout the show you keep coming back to this sense of hope. And I think that it's a very interesting thing for us to talk about because God is moving and doing miraculous things. And yes, it's happening in our government. It's happening in the grassroots. Meanwhile, we need to see also these things that are very serious, like a collapse of the dollar and an economic collapse, and how dangerous that is, and look at them at the same time. And I think we can only do that through a biblical, historical worldview of seeing how God has acted throughout history. Goes back to being self-sufficient. So you've seen the egg prices go through the roof. Get some chickens, guys, because the chicken prices are just kind of a little bitty taste of what can happen. So when we talk about being self-sufficient, it's not just because I'm a prepper. It's because I feel like it's the right way to live. I enjoy going outside. I enjoy planting things. I think it's God's natural way for us. But at the same time, there is a preparedness aspect to what we do.
Well, are we really going to be able, though, to break through what I think in the last half of the 20th century into the now 21st has been the encouragement of what essentially amounts to an abandonment of the spirit of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Because people talk about capitalism, it's all about money. No, I think capitalism in the first instance is all about initiative.
Yeah.
It's all about who starts it, who takes the initiative. And whether it's taking the initiative to go out and find a suitable place to farm or taking the initiative to turn an idea into something that's going to help people do their laundry. You are talking about a mentality that says, I'm not going to wait for somebody else to come up with it and hope that somebody will hire me and give me a little money so I can go buy some soap.
Exactly.
Right? I'm going to remember how to do it. And I'll even teach other people how to do it. And then we can build an enterprise based on how to do it. And others will benefit. But the initiative was always assumed to be in the hands of people who had that intrepid entrepreneurial spirit, that intrepid spirit.
Injuring him, shooting him in the pelvis, and then the law enforcement responded by shooting back. The protesters who were out here last night say that they want to see a full, complete investigation to see what really happened.
Peaceful protest is not domestic terrorism. This is a chilling effect on the peaceful right of assembly, the First Amendment. Police murdered a peaceful protester.
There's a difference between protest and what's happening there. Arson, attacking citizens, shooting police officers, using explosives, beating people up, then burning their car down.
So obviously, difference of opinion as to what these protesters are doing. We can tell you that about 25 or so, maybe more, campsites were actually broken up as a result of this. And the GBI says it found the following. I'm going to read them to you. They say they found mortar-style fireworks, multiple edged weapons, pellet rifles, gas masks, and a blowtorch, all of which were taken in for evidence. Now, we're going to have an awful lot more in this story for you coming up at 5 o'clock. But for now, that's the latest from here at the DeKalb County Jail. I'm Mark Teichner for Good Day Atlanta. Buck, back to you.
All right, Mark, thank you. We'll check back in with you later. Now, some protesters have issued a call to violence tonight in retaliation for their friend's death. APD released a statement saying, quote, our officers are on high alert and we will continue our work to keep our streets safe for our residents, businesses, and visitors alike. Well, now
Paez says news of their death has been devastating.
I believe it was your article that I saw that someone was killed, and I wanted to call him because I was worried. I was worried, like, what if Manny's friend was killed, and I was worried he was sad. I wasn't ready for it to be him.
Paez's brother asked that his own identity be hidden because of the circumstances surrounding his sibling's death. Law enforcement shot and killed Paez Wednesday after GBI says Paez shot a state trooper trying to clear protesters camping out at the old prison farm site in DeKalb County. That's where they plan to build the new Atlanta Public Safety Center. The protesters have raised questions about how the shooting happened and have called for people to protest this weekend. DeKalb County Police told me today officers are on high alert. We're absolutely concerned for the safety of our officers, but not only our officers, the community as well. So what we're doing is we're increasing visibility, but we're really kind of pushing it down to our officers that they need to be extra vigilant. We want to make sure that all of our officers are able to go home. And as law enforcement work on a plan to remove protesters who remain at the site, Paez's brother says his family is still in disbelief by all of this.
They haven't even laid down bricks and there's already blood. I do a lot of traveling and I wanted to talk to him. But then the reception wasn't good. So I was just, I'll call Manny when I get home. But then it was too late.
That was Bo Beth Yates reporting for us tonight. As the future site of the city of Atlanta Public Safety Center continues to be met with opposition, the controversial piece of land is also leading to a lot of questions. One of those questions is about fires at a nearby home development. Residents in the area suggest the fires are connected to the protesters. 11 Alive's Paulo Searle verifies tonight.
Last month, we had 2 homes burned down around the corner. We had
Burned down?
2 new homes under construction right around the corner here were burned down.
This is Mark Bolden, president of a homeowners association near the future Atlanta Police Training Facility. This is the property he is referring to. New developments are being built on Boulder Crest Road, not far from the controversial police training facility. So, had there been fires here? And if so, were they intentionally set? Let's verify. We went straight to the source, the DeKalb County Fire Department. 11 Alive received this DeKalb fire incident report. The report mentions firefighters were sent on December 10th to a small outside fire in an area they believe protesters had gathered. From there, firefighters were then sent to the development on Boulder Crest Road, where 2 homes under construction were on fire.
There's 4 homes around the corner under construction in new development. 2 were burned down to the ground.
Nearby residents like Bolden believe the fires could be tied back to Cop City protesters. In the incident report, the fire department mentions it is believed, due to the close proximity to the protesters, that they may be involved. However, the case is still open, and the fires have not been officially linked to any person or group of people, and no one is charged with a crime.
No one was arrested because they had to determine that it was truly arson.
While we can verify there were 2 separate fires here on December 10th, DeKalb Fire is still trying to investigate if this was arson. In DeKalb County, Paulo Searle, 11 Alive News.
He shot back, killing that protester, and now the GBI says they discovered a gun. The agency says investigators found that gun on a protester. A silent memorial for an activist shot and killed during a law enforcement raid at the site of a planned training center for Atlanta police.
I wanted to be with other people who are feeling the same way for the same reasons.
Dozens of people lit candles for Manuel Teran, who friends call Tortuguita.
I am not for a violent movement. I do not agree with a protester instigating police. I have seen that police have terrorized Atlanta forest offenders.
Law enforcement on Wednesday raided Entrenchment Creek Park to clear the woods of activists camped out there protesting the site they call Cop City. The GBI says Teran opened fire, wounding a state trooper. The agency says officers shot back, killing Teran.
We're dealing not with protesters, but with criminals.
And now the GBI says investigators recovered this handgun from the scene. The agency describes it as a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield 9mm. The GBI says ballistic investigators matched the gun they say they found on Teran to the bullet that wounded the trooper.
Arson, attacking citizens, shooting police officers, using explosives, beating people up, then burning their car down.
The GBI accuses some protesters of attacking police, firefighters, and nearby communities, damaging property and setting fires. They've conducted numerous raids and charged at least 12 protesters with domestic terrorism.
Are they domestic terrorists?
I don't think so. What terror are they causing? Who's terrorizing whom?
Now, there were some calls on social media.
Treated the robot as if it was an abused dog. They pleaded for people to show compassion and understanding toward the grocery delivering machines. Some people even wanted to remind others that it's not the robot's fault that they're getting in, but they're just doing what they're programmed to do. So, Katie, your thoughts on not only grocery delivering robots, but the feelings that some people already have for these mechanisms.
Yeah, the machines. Here's how I'm going to spin this entire thing as the wife of a postal carrier. If people would treat the way they treated the machines is the way they treat the people who deliver items to them, whether it be the mail delivery people or UPS or Amazon, FedEx. Wait a minute, this is exactly how they treat them. So if you're getting up in arms about kicking a robot, you better be up in arms about the way that our actual human beings are being treated, because I hear stories. I hear plenty of stories. So if you're going to be upset about these robots getting kicked, you better be more upset the way our actual humans are being treated out there who deliver us items.